As the founder of Endless Events and creator of Event Props Community and host of the event industry podcast, Event Icons, Event Brew, and Event Tech podcast, Will Curran has been named one of the most influential people in the meeting and events industry, one of the 40 under 40 event industry leaders, 35 entrepreneurs under the age of 35, and the highest customer satisfaction of any event company in the industry. Will has been producing in-person, virtual, and hybrid events since high school when he started his first company and has now worked in the management of large event clients such as Emerald City, Comic-Con, Anheuser-Busch, Warner Brothers, Martin Salt, and Uber. His team's mission is to simplify the event planning process by creating the equation for an event's perfect solution. From event management to business development to the latest technologies, Will Curran has a diverse background in growing events and companies to the next level.
1, 2, 3, welcome to Eventus 365, the podcast that's all about corporate events and the magic behind the scenes. I'm your host, Yanique DaCosta, and I am excited to take you on a journey through the world of corporate events. But before we dive in, let's talk about the stress of creating marketing material for your events. We all know how tough it can be when deadlines are tight and resources are limited, but guess what? YKMD Visual Communications has got your back. Our design firm specializes in working with corporate event professionals just like you, and we're here to help take the stress out of creating stunning graphics for your event. Our team of expert designers can deliver custom brand-compliant designs in just 12 hours. So whether you need branding, signage, marketing materials, or anything else, YKMD's got you covered. Okay, now that that's done, let's start the show. And we are diving into the fun stuff. So, Will, you're here. You're hanging out with me. We're talking about all the great stuff. Can I tell you how excited I was when I got your message? I was kind of like low-key a groupie, and I didn't even know it. I was like, is he actually messaging? Or, you know, like how sometimes you're on Instagram and you get these messages about like being able to win $1 million or like
you're like, oh, it's got to be too good to be true.
Yeah. I was like, who? I was like, there's no way. So I was super excited to see you.
Little do you know, I'm still needing you to wire transfer me that so I can give the money to my Nigerian prince of a
Awesome. I don't know if it's ever gonna come. But we could, it would be nice to think about. So diving into the things, right? Number one, thanks for joining me, right, on Aventus.
Thanks for having me.
What's the most embarrassing mistake you've ever made while working on an event? And like, how'd you recover from it?
There's like been tons of embarrassing things. I think it's like the embarrassing things that you learn from to know to never do it again. I've had a couple. The first one that comes to mind that I think I've talked on other podcasts, so I'll try to pick another one. But one time when we first got our CRM and I set up Nutshell and put we put where the field was like event start time, end time. And then we also had like physical contracts at that point too. And I basically never verified that the information in my CRM was correct. Either it changed or whatever it was definitely my fault for not verifying.
Oh yeah, that's fun.
I was with my event manager at the time and I was like changing in the warehouse and she calls me and she's like, where are you right now? I'm like, in the warehouse. She goes, the event starts at 6. Not at 7. I'm looking at the clock. It's like 5:55. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So that's a completely long story of like how I totally messed up. I learned always verify the information in your CRM. Other like embarrassing things, because I was in production, there was all the times where like technology just sometimes went completely wrong. And you would just sit there and be like, I planned for everything to go right. Why isn't this working? And you have to just like troubleshoot immediately. I'm trying to think if there's like anything else super basic. I'll give another one that I don't think I've ever talked about on air. I've had it like probably the most embarrassing for me that then you realize is not embarrassing is that when I was DJing and I was like doing these massive stage setups, all the times I would jump off the stage and go rile up the audience or whatever the heck it was, or I'd be like jumping on the top of the subwoofer to like lead the cha-cha slide. I was doing a lot of high school dances and college events back in the day.
I love that for you.
I've done it so many times. This is probably why I have bad knees now. It's like I jump and I'd slip and just slam like my leg or my knee or wherever the heck it is. And I'm like high energy. So everyone's looking at me and then I slip and like hurt myself. And I'm like, ooh, I gotta, I gotta keep my cool, you know? And that,
you sweat at this point.
yeah, and I think that was probably some of the most embarrassing stuff. I ripped my skinny jeans once at an event for sure. Yeah, I've had I think like it feels like a sum of embarrassing things rather than just like that one single embarrassing thing.
I have a feeling, I mean, that we've all had some things. I feel like we've all had some things, one thing or another. I have one that's actually it's pretty bad, but like, it's bad, but it's not as bad as it sounds versus when it actually happened. Like one time at band camp, when I sent out this email and, you know, different platforms, depending on what they are from your CRMs, like Active Campaign to like, you know, Splash, like they have different formats for customization.
Oh, yeah.
So I type it out like on like, you know, Microsoft. And then I paste it into the platform to press send and schedule it. It's all good. And it goes out. It goes out to everybody.
And it's in the interwebs.
No. My favorite part about it, right? It's one thing for it to like be out there, right? It's that it actually went to their inboxes and it said, hello, open parentheses, first name, close parentheses.
Oh, yeah. You've had to put like the action. Yeah.
And I almost, because it was such a rookie thing. And it was just like, there is no way this is happening in like my actual life.
I've done that so many times. Yeah, or you put the wrong person's name. Like back when like Tinder and Bumble were just getting started, you know, you start to figure out a formula like what's working.
Oh yeah, copy.
You're like, yeah, and you're like copy paste, and you're like, oh shoot, I just sent a message to Katie and her name is Janelle or something like that, and you're like, yep, and that's how I'm never gonna get the first date.
It's so bad that I used to do that. I don't really do the dating apps anymore, but once upon a time, I actually used to have my bio typed out, like in my notes on my iPhone, and then my like answers to very specific questions that I just copy and paste. Because I was just like, listen, this is all about like
I did that on eHarmony for sure.
Let's try to do this at scale. You know, if I hit this to 25 guys, at least 1 to 25 has to hit.
Tell me you're a marketer without telling me you're a marketer.
Yeah, the fun stuff. So, okay, you know, you were talking about doing a lot of events for like high schools and stuff. I actually started my design when it comes to events in college and for a lot of like college parties and like sororities and fraternities.
Heck yeah.
And like then it transitioned to like nightclubs. And a lot of designers, even now, like they turn their nose up at like nightclub work. But at the end of the day, like that nightclub work, it got me into casinos. That casino work got me into corporations. That corporation work kind of just like, got me here. Right?
For sure. I feel like it's a one piece. It's that piece of artwork that I also think that you can put your personal brand on. So you probably got to sign it as being designed by you because they're like, let's be honest, these college events or these club events, you know, they're like, here's $50 to design a flyer. And you're like, okay, I really should be getting paid more money to do this, but I know I can whip this out in like in less than an hour. So like, and I want my name on it, you know?
Yeah. No. So I used to tag it. With my logo and my email address and phone number so that more people could contact me for work. So I used to just churn those things out.
Oh my God.
And I think I was one of the few mind you, this is like, you know, 2009, 2010. It doesn't sound that long ago, but it feels like forever.
Forever ago.
And I was one of the few designers that was like, you know, making $175 a pop. And I was like, you know, 30 minutes. I was like, I'm done. Knocking them out. And that used to pay for like a penthouse apartment in Miami. So
yeah,
why people turn their nose up at it? Because it also helped develop a skill. Like, you know, there's still hierarchy, there's still color contrast. It's about how you choose to apply those things. And then
and everyone's got so many pretty posters in like the club world. Like you really got to figure a way. Like how am I going to get this to capture the attention? Yeah, for sure.
There's definitely some value in starting there. So I don't know.
So that's somewhere like where I have a little bit of graphic design experience in events is that we when we did the college and high school events, they kind of stole this idea from Boom Entertainment, but they create like club and poster flyers for these high school and college events. So it looked like you were going to a club because like. everyone who's not 21, what do they want to be? 21, so they can drink, right? So like,
so badly.
yeah, so then what I did is I created all these posters, but what was so perfect about it is that like I got to put like I had all the high schools handing out these flyers trying to promote their event, but I always put like, oh, DJ Will C from Arizona Pro DJs, and like put Arizona Pro DJs presents, and like it created this brand where literally they were promoting like we were coming like an act into the school, and like that was one of the best things I ever did for on the marketing standpoint was like put your name on the actual work.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a thing. So what do you think sets events apart from like the ones that kind of like fall short? Because I mean, you were just talking about like what do people want like when they're 21 to be 21? Like, I mean, in that same, I feel like it's like a great frame to like transition to that specific. Like, what do you think sets events apart?
Yeah, I think it obviously depends on like who your audience is, and there's all like that it depends like answers that you can kind of put to this. But like I think when it comes to like what really makes a great event for me is that it's so seamless that people don't really even they think to themselves like, how was this even possible? Like, how did they even think of this? But for us, like as event professionals, we just like it's so easy. It's like, you know what I mean? Like that's one of my favorite parts about like getting to create an event is that like people are just that aren't in events are like mind blown about what you did. And to you, you're like, oh yeah, it's like walk in the park. So I think that's one first thing is like it's so smooth that it seems so much like magic to everybody else. I think the next piece of it is that it gets people to change something, like for example, one of the most common like answers to this question is like it changes their behavior, right? It gets them to do something differently. It gets them motivated. It gets them to act this way or whatever it may be. But for me, it creates this moment in their life that they can look back on. I mean, I think that like you talk about life event, I think like a really truly incredible event and the ones that I've attended that have changed my life are the ones that get me to like think of a new idea or to get me to change the way I think about something or to meet someone that ends up, changing my life course in some sort of way. I think those are the truly, really impactful events. Granted, like, I don't think that all the events that we plan are going to be that way. I think anyone out there who thinks that like every single event that you're going to plan, especially if you're like a third party planner, or you're a supplier, like, yeah, like you're lucky if you get to work on that caliber of events every single day, but we don't. There's for every one of those events, there's 5 that aren't changing someone's behavior. That might be more of a filler, but I think that what the filler events are that aren't changing people's lives allow you to work on skills that then allow you to elevate your planning abilities and your skill set to make it so you can then deliver that level of experience to somebody. So I think that's, for me, like the ones that really set apart are definitely the ones that seem so magical and so easy, but then also like really impactfully change people. Like there's a saying from a movie I love called Groove, and it says like, so why do you do events? Like why do you do this? Like and it's talking about this underground rave they're doing in San Francisco. And they're like, you have the risk of getting, arrested. You can lose a ton of money. Why do you like put all this effort in? He's like, you don't know why? He's like, no, tell me why. He goes, I do it for the nod. He's like, the nod? He's like, one time per party, someone walks up to me and goes, like, thanks for doing this. This changed me. This changed my life. And they nod. And I nod back. And I think like that for me is what makes an amazing event, is when that person then like recognizes that this event changed them. Or sometimes subconsciously, they don't even know it until they get home.
It's interesting you talk about change because I have this, I know where I got it from too. There's this guy called Alex Hormozy. He's like the marketing guy of all marketing guys, but he's really like about business scaling, buying businesses, making business more profitable, all of this. And he says regularly, I'm sure because it's in my head like it's me who says it, there's no point in reading a book if after you read the book, you don't actually change any of your behavior or implement anything that you learned from the book. So sometimes I feel like if we're talking about an industry specific kind of event, people should leave with an action item. Mm-hmm. That's just how I feel. And even if we're talking about like Coachella or like Burning Man, like people should leave like feeling relaxed, like I can go back, like something. They should leave with something.
Yeah, for sure.
Something that has impacted the way they think, feel,
For sure.
act, something.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think music festivals are a really great example. Like, I've had life-changing experiences at music festivals, and like, that a lot of times you think to yourself, like, oh yeah, listen, it's just music being played on stage, but you don't realize like that music can sometimes move people to get catharsis about a trauma that they've had. It could lead to somebody meeting a girl that eventually becomes their wife, and there could be like a million different things that then impact those things. But like we have to recognize that these events do have that power to be able to really create these incredible experiences that change people, like you said.
Yeah, for sure. Switching gears just a little bit. So you are like the events guy of events guys. Like you're that guy, right? Like I feel like you have the repository of information. So like your company's guide to event trends is like one of the best guides published every single year. What are some of the most exciting trends you're seeing emerge in 2023 or for 2023? It feels like the year is almost over, but
It does. It's always so funny that like we publish this guide, we write it all basically the end of like the second half of the year leading up to it because we're preparing for like what's changing in this year is going to lead to next year. And we publish it, and as soon as it's published, we're like, that's why, like I always say, it's trend guides. You gotta stay on top of them, but at the same time too, like pick one thing, implement it throughout the entire year because far too often things are changing so fast that you end up getting just leaning so much on these trends guides, you then get stuck not changing yourself and not deciding to move forward a trend on your own. But anyways, to that point, I think that when it comes to these trend guides, the things that are most exciting for me is really about like what's gonna now happen with events now that we for 2023, like what's gonna happen now that we've kind of come out of the pandemic, like even though it's technically still going on, I guess, and how do we
blows my mind, by the way.
Yeah, right. And how do we then take all this learning that we've had and these experiences that we've had, and now how do we implement it now that things have kind of settled in a lot of ways? Last year, I think a lot of people were like, gotta do hybrid, we gotta do hybrid, we gotta do hybrid. But then a lot of people were like, oh, wow, I see a lot of success doing not hybrid, just going purely in person. And so a big trend, I think, is recognizing, though, that now that that's kind of come and gone, people are in some ways might be craving virtual again because they are like, maybe I don't want to attend this conference in person.
Maybe I don't want to get on the plane. Maybe I don't
want to go on the
family.
plane.
Maybe I don't want to have to do the 32-hour travel to the other side of the world. Yeah.
Exactly. I think that a lot of people are feeling that way right now, and I'm feeling that way. Like I cut down tremendously on the amount of travel that I've done, so I'm looking for alternative ways on that end. I think the other big trend that we're seeing this year is really related to, how do we effectively and this is very relevant, I think, to you in a lot of ways, is like, how do we market events in a lot of ways? Like, not only that, but like, it's the crosshairs of not only how do we market the events, but also like, how do we sometimes use the events as marketing? Like, I think marketing is really changing in 2023. We're basically coming out of a time when there was more investment money in software companies than ever. So the ideas of doing content marketing is kind of dead because everybody's doing it, right? And there's so much money that was being pummeled into marketing, and then now there's this grass to be like, wow, oh my gosh, our sales are down. They were booming in 2020 or 2021. What do we do? What do we do? What do you do? And so like everybody's struggling to figure out like what's next for marketing. So I see as a big trend figuring out, you got to figure out how you're going to market now moving forward. I don't necessarily have the answer for what's the perfect form of marketing. I used to preach inbound. I think there's a couple different ways we go, and one of them is related to another trend that I have. But I think a lot of people are right now struggling to figure out like what's the future for marketing going to look like. And that's where I think the future of events really is going to come in place, is that like we can use events to lead the growth. And that's a big, AirMe, shout out to them, created this term called event-led growth. I think that's really a huge future for us. But another big trend that is kind of related to that marketing end of things is also like, this is the thing I've been preaching the most, is like community. And related in a lot of ways is community marketing. People right now, I think, are feeling very icky about social media. Like for me, like I basically only have LinkedIn. I got rid of Twitter after it kind of had its implosion. I haven't been on Facebook in a number of years, and I get on LinkedIn and I feel like it's a lot of like, yeah, look at me. You know, and if anyone is on audio only, I'm like pounding my chest and acting like a gorilla, right? And I think for a lot of people, they're like, well, I still want that sense of connection. I still want to get help online, but I don't want to necessarily go someplace where an algorithm is deciding what I see. And I definitely don't want to be on a place that's filled with stuff I don't care about in a lot of ways. So like for me right now, I'm thinking that community is really going to be a big future of marketing because people still want that connection, and companies have the ability to be able to deliver these spaces with thought experts and all the same reasons why we did content marketing in the first place. I think we have the future to be able to do that as well. And I think more importantly, because, you know, some people listening to this might be thinking, well, I'm not going to use community marketing, blah, blah. Well, if you're an event person, I think we need to be thinking about how do we take all the energy that we create in an event and then continue it year round. And that's where I think the community comes. You build all this energy, you build all this hype, you build all this excitement, and then we do nothing with it. But in reality, like we should be saying, oh, you love this event so much? All those people are also here. So we can continue almost like the events going all year round. So that's one big thing that I've been really focused on is the community stuff. And I got a bunch of other random weird ones and things like that we can talk about if we want to go down that rabbit hole. But community is kind of for me this year is the big trend that I think that we can really, really implement within our businesses and within our events to really see a impactful difference and also potentially solve that marketing challenge that I'm talking about earlier.
So lots of things going off in my head. So the first one is like, when we're talking about the trend of seeing people, like, you know, because there was one point where everybody was going stir crazy, right? They're like, let me out. And now they're like, yeah, no. And I was just waiting on everybody to catch up with me because I never liked leaving my house. I was like, this is you mean I have to put on makeup? I have to comb out my hair? Are you kidding? Have you ever tried to comb out my hair? Of course you have. It takes some time, right? Yeah. And then, you know, you got to get the perfect face meet and the right outfit. And then there's the shoes. Then there's, you know, there's the before event shoes and during event shoes and then after event shoes. And you have to all fit them in your bag.
And you know, a lot of people have kids now, or, you know, they got a dog during the pandemic, you know, like there's so many, like, you talk about those are almost like all internal struggles that we decide not to go. But then, like, think about like all the external stuff and pressure that we're feeling as well.
Yeah, no, that complete. Again, you can also tell that I'm single with no children because I think of that. I was like, sure. I'm just struggling as a human. Okay.
Yeah, for sure,
like,
for sure.
Even like, you know, during the pandemic, like, I know that there were not a lot of people making a lot of money. Thankfully, I wasn't in the situation because my business pivoted in a way where it made that accommodation and we were just flush. But now it's also looking at like my expenses. And I was like, this is awesome. You mean client dinners can be virtual without me spending money now? That's great.
Right.
Like, even if I do is like sending a gift card for Uber Eats, like it's amazing versus like, you know, the $500 bill is like, oh, yes, you know, some cookies for the kids. Let's chat. So I felt that one deep in my soul, and I hope that trend perseveres. And then when you were talking about community, I thought it was also interesting. So last season we had talked to Liz Lathan, and she's like,
yeah, she says about it.
Right. And she's like community factory, like all about a thing. And she was actually the person, who after talking to her, I was just like, oh, she sold me the Kool-Aid. Like I felt it. And as much as she sold me the Kool-Aid, that little part, I was like, how do I build this community? So I think my Q4, my Q4 of last year, well, now I don't have quarters anymore. Now I have like horizons, which is a whole other thing to explain. But my Q4 was like spent planning out how I'm going to actually build a community or environment in 2023. It is within my, like, you know, towards the end of the year thing, but I do think it's definitely a very important thing to be able to create and cultivate and nurture and build these very authentic relationships that are mutually beneficial, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think, like, you know, we're in this stage right now where I think people are willing, like, I think there's going to be this trend that's going to happen in social media in the next, like, year or so, is that people are going to be okay with the idea of paying money in order to have these kind of platforms that we like, rather than giving up our data or, feeling like at any time a platform is going to disappear. I think people are going to get to the point where they say, oh yeah, I'm willing to pay $10 a month to use LinkedIn or something like that. And I think that day is when the platforms will go less about how do we only get engagement, how do we get people to come back? Because if we don't get engagement, we don't get ad clicks, and if we don't get ad clicks, we don't, this, and if we don't get people to come back, that they're, the data we have on them across the web is going to go away. Therefore, our advertisers are going to be less happy. I think that can go away, and then focus back on what social media was great for in the beginning, which is like the idea of bringing people together and allowing people to connect. But until that day, I think this is the prime opportunity for anyone out there who has an audience to basically come and say like, yeah, let me build a space where my 1,000 true fans can come together,
I love that. I feel like as you were saying, I was like, and I hope no one kills me. Like, I was like, I would totally pay money to use LinkedIn just to like get rid of the pressure, to alleviate some of the pressure that the organization is facing so that they can provide me with a more authentic user experience.
Exactly. Boom. That's like, I think the best way to describe it.
I was like, how do I say this nicely? So you were talking earlier about how you have like a bunch of other weird trends. Like, what are some of like the weirdest trends you see emerging recently?
Yeah. So what's really cool is that I forgot to kind of mention this but like I started as working events. I kind of mentioned like the DJ company I own that turned into a production company that then turned to an event management company. But luckily, like one of the reasons why I love coming up with these trends is that like our company is like in the weeds. We're an event management company, literally working events, seeing every aspect of our events when it comes to clients. And so a lot of them also too come from me attending events. So what I try to do is marry my knowledge from the years of planning events and then attending events. But one thing that I'm feeling a lot of, and this is my hot take, controversial one that everyone loves talking about, is that I think in 2023 that we're going to be looking at the rise of cannabis within events. I think that there's a huge cultural shift towards acceptance of cannabis, and it's no longer taboo anymore. It's getting legalized in so many different places. But I think for a lot of people, instead of going to the bar, they're reaching for cannabis instead. And so I think as event professionals, even if you aren't planning on serving it or whatever, you need to be aware that people are going to be partaking in it. And I think we need to design our experiences around that. And even better is if you can then also allow that experience then to happen, because then, I think it's a really, really positive trend. I mean, for me, it's cheaper than alcohol. So like, think about like as an attendee, I'm way happier to pay $10 maybe for an edible, but like you'd say $10 for a drink times 5 drinks, you're spending $50-$60, very, very easily.
I mean, but now all I heard was calories when you said 5 drinks. I was like,
yeah, and then calories. Exactly.
That's my reason for not drinking. It's calories. I'm like, I go out to the club and I'm like, can I get a coconut water? And they're like, and I'm like, no, seriously. Oh, you don't have coconut water? Okay, I'll just take regular water, because what you will not do is destroy this body.
And what's interesting too is that like for a lot of people, they're moving away from alcohol. Like I don't drink anymore. And so like when I'm going to an event and then all you're serving is alcohol beverages, it kind of feels weird for me that I'm like, I'm not planning on drinking. So, I think this also pairs into a very big trend we're seeing towards, the need for like non-alcoholic beverages at our events, mocktails, all these things like that, I think are really great opportunities for event professionals to be thinking about this. And that pairs very closely to the idea that people just in general just aren't drinking as much, but maybe are reaching for things like cannabis instead. I think that it's proving to be a really, really awesome chance for event professionals to experiment too, because right now, like at an event, like if you were going to like enjoy cannabis, you might be like, oh, I'm going to go, smoke a joint in the alleyway, or, oh, hey, like, do you have the
shady place?
Yeah, you're whispering, do you have the edibles, and like, there's this chance, I think, for event professionals to get ahead of this trend and start implementing inside of their events. And, a lot of it, I think, has to do with the fact that people think it's still kind of taboo, but it isn't. You literally can almost ask anybody out there and be like, do you like cannabis or not? And it's an open conversation. It's not as like such as it used to be.
I'm about to give you the funniest story ever in life. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to send this recording to his. So I was in Colorado with my old boss. Really, really cool guy. Like, I mean, me and his daughters were the same age, but he's like for me, right, presents as this very traditional, older white guy who's, very like Midwestern kind of, straight as an arrow, follow the rules, get things done kind of guy. I mean, generally, like when it comes to workspace, he was very intense. However, I still appreciated him as a human being. And I also wanted to make a good impression, right? Like, we're in Colorado at this conference, okay? I'm Jamaican. I was born in Jamaica. The general stereotype of Jamaicans is that, like, all they do is smoke marijuana. Mind you, I never saw weed until I came to America, and I think I was, like, graduated or something really.
That's amazing.
And, and so we're walking down the street, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's gonna think it's me. And everywhere we're going, all we're doing, like, and at this point, like, marijuana was not, I want to say it was maybe 2015, but like,
so either just got legalized or it was about to be legalized, or
Colorado was, like, I think at the time, the only recreational state. And then California wasn't recreational yet. It was like medicinal. And all I could think to myself was, oh my God, this man is going to think that I am high this whole time. Because everywhere we go, it smells like weed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope he knows it's not me. And I was so stressed about it the entire time we were there. And I'm almost sure this man gave no thought to it. I'm quite sure he was not. But I'm like, I'm in my 20s. I'm like, God, I'm like, I want to make a good impression. This is like
totally.
And I can only imagine now, right? Like, with the easy access to be able to just go and like, I'm in Seattle. I'm going to stop at a dispensary, on my way from some state where it's not like, from Georgia, or I'm going to stop at a dispensary or whatever.
Yeah.
And thinking, gosh, I hope no one tells my boss because, no one else is doing it. Like, I can imagine like the kind of anxiety around that. And then thinking to yourself, well, I guess maybe I should have a drink. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know.
It's very interesting too, because like, so I like, this is my personal opinion, but like as a CEO of a company that's had a lot of employees, and like I would much rather have an employee partake using cannabis and then drinking, because if you drink, this is how I feel nowadays, is if I drink, I'm gonna feel like crap the next day.
But you
you feel like and you can be hungover, you feel sluggish. It doesn't matter even if you could take your alcohol well, it slows you down. But like cannabis, like you partake with it and you like basically are like, it's a normal day. Like it just feels like as a boss, like I would exactly. So like I'm imagining like an employee incentive party or something like that. Like I would rather that happen, because then we could have serious conversations about the quarterly goals tomorrow, rather than everyone wake up and be like, oh, it's 11 and my head is pounding.
No. I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And I don't know if I think that was like taboo, because especially like in 2020, I know a lot of things. 2020 I spent a lot of time by myself.
For sure.
I did a lot of deep diving and research into like different industries and things. And like the cannabis industry was one where I was like really like feeling like I should like heavily commit. Like I joined like all these membership groups to find out all these different things. So I was like, I think I might want to be in like the cannabis marketing industry. And then we won't talk about where that went when I in. But I do feel like there's a place for it, like a set up place for it. And it's going to be a thing where everybody's either going to have to get in first and get in really good, or they're kind of going to be like left by the wayside, picking up the crumbs from like the people who got in early and built those real relationships,
Sure.
Because like, even like there are certain cannabis brands, like we're having a really hard time getting like, POS processing or like packaging or shipping. Like there's a whole like they're dealing with all these challenges. So for someone to come in the early stages and like help them fix this problem and then evolve together, there's a different level of bonding and appreciation that happens in spaces like that.
Definitely. And I'll give it for anybody who's like to help to kind of put hopefully an end cap on this for you. It's like anybody who's listening to this right now is like, well, it's not legal where I'm gonna be. Or like I'm not gonna have. I don't really agree with it or whatever it is. you have to recognize this is what trends are really about, that trend is a impacting force that's going to happen whether you like it or not. And here's the most important thing I would suggest to anybody is just be prepared that don't be shocked if you spend $10,000 on a bar for a party and it doesn't even get utilized, or not even 100% utilized, but like even half utilized. If you see consumption is down of alcohol at your events, just recognize this trend is happening and this is why it's happening. So then that way, you know, and especially in 2023, we're all concerned about budgets. How do I get more budget when, you know, potentially there's an economic disaster around the corner, or it's already happened, or whatever it may be? You know, we need to be prepared that like budgets are tighter, and this is a way that you can potentially save money. Instead, maybe it's from going for a free bar for everyone to utilize for free. It's starting to charge people for drinks, to say like, let's save that $10,000 and put it towards a keynote speaker that's better to have, you know, that can motivate our employees, whatever it may be. But I think this is the way that we need to be thinking about our events. And if a larger trend, I know I'm totally ranting now at this point, but like a big trend I think for this year is that like people need to stop taking their 2019 playbooks of their events, even their 2020 playbooks, and we got to like toss them out the window. We got to crush the box instead of just think outside the box. And we got to start fresh, because like it's literally getting to the point where people are just doing the same things over and over and over again. And then sitting here going, but I wish I had more budget. Oh, I can't do that innovative idea because of this XYZ and whatever it is. I'm like, well, have you ever thought about getting rid of your catering budget completely? And they go, how dare you say that we change anything?
And God forbid. Yeah, I mean, you know what? I'm gonna leave it there, because I think I'll jump on a soapbox when it comes to just like people being willing to pivot and change, you know, review, and make decisions based on like real day data versus what they think should happen in their head. But you did talk about recognizing things. And since we're going to talk about recognizing things, you're often recognized as like an influential figure in the events industry. I mean,
Thanks.
again, I like probably like the biggest groupie in this room right now. So what advice do you have for event professionals looking to establish themselves and, you know, grow their careers?
Yeah, I mean, like one of the first things I would have is like everyone thinks that there's like this perfect, like you have to fit into this mold that, and again, like this is the box, crush the box kind of mentality, like about what you need to be saying, ideas you need to have, how you need to be specifically innovative and things like that. But in reality, like none of that matters at all. Like, so one tip I'd give to anybody who's aspiring to like make a dent in the industry is that like, you know, these last probably 3-4 years or so, I haven't been afraid to be really controversial in the industry. I'm not saying like I go out on LinkedIn and put people on blast. That's kind of dumb, and that's kind of a great way to make people not like you. But like, and I think we've talked in small private circles actually about how there's people who do that, and no one likes them, right? But what I do think is that everyone sits here and says, well, I'm afraid to talk about cannabis because, you know, it's not necessarily legal. It's kind of taboo. But in reality, like I started a podcast called Event Brew, and it was like, I was like, you know what? We have all these amazing conversations at conferences and things like that, and we never talk about this stuff on like Event Icons and Event Tech Podcast, my other like podcasts. I'm like, you know, why are we afraid to talk about this? I was like, you know what? I want to stir things up. I want to make a place where we feel comfortable to talk about anything we want to talk about and tell it how it really is. And we did that. And I've talked about some crazy stuff. And we've like, you know, like we've talked about everything about like the death of associations, which God forbid you ever talk about the death of associations in the events industry. You know, we've talked about things like, would you plan an event for a controversial figure in history, right? Like all these things that you think to yourself, like these are things that we actually think about and care about. What happens when your client isn't paying you on time? Like, where's the gray area in terms of like when you fire a client versus not fire a client? All these things like that we actually care about that are considered kind of controversial. I'll tell you that I've never gotten an email from a listener being like, oh my gosh, I was so offended, or oh my gosh, I was never like denied a speaking engagement because like somebody said, oh, I listen to your podcast and I don't agree with XYZ. I think that our industry is so hospitable about listening and being so open and honest with each other that like there's chances for anybody, if you have an innovative idea or a controversial opinion, like say it, put it out there. Again, I don't think you should put people down as part of that. You shouldn't be like, oh, you know, MP3 is the best form of audio file and WAV sucks. So, because Brant and I are really cool friends. Brant, you suck for thinking that WAV is the best format file. Here's why it is, things like that. I don't think you should do that, but like I think that we should be a little bit more controversial and a little bit more open to pushing the boundaries of what we do. Another tip that I'd give to people who are looking to make an impact in the industry is that I wouldn't be afraid to start building your personal brand separate from your company earlier rather than later.
That's
and I think you'll like this one too, because you do this basically for a living. Is that like for me, when I was starting my company, I was endless, and like I was my company. I wear lime green t-shirts all the time. People joke about all the time, oh my gosh, Will's not wearing lime green today. I'm actually not wearing lime green today, so people, I'm sure, are actually freaking out about this. And people would be like, I was always afraid to like detach it in some ways, and it wasn't until I was like, I need to buy willcurran.com and make it talk about me as a speaker and all these things like that, that I really started seeing that people were like, oh, Will Curran, Endless, two separate entities from each other. But it doesn't mean that you can't put all your energy into focusing on that one thing. And that's probably another tip I'd give to people, is that a lot of times too, I see people really start to split their energy between two different things. And you'll notice that like for Will Curran right now at this moment, like I am doing a little bit of double duty. I'm promoting Endless, but I'm also working on my new project, Event Profs Community. And so like I am putting those energy into those two separate things. I'm a little hypocritical when it comes to this, but it's because I've gotten Endless to the point where it starts to grow and run itself without me. And now I'm ready to like go to my next thing that I'm going to help grow until it doesn't need me anymore. Then I'll move on to my next thing. And I think for a lot of people, I noticed that, their energy is like they decide to join a board of an association. I obviously have a lot of problems with associations, so we're not doing that one. But
I can't wait to poke at your controversial comment in there.
Oh my gosh. And so like, I've noticed a lot of times people will be like, oh, I'll join this association. They put like all their energy into that association, but then they're also trying to promote their company brand and then also trying to promote their personal brand. You kind of have to limit it in some way and choose where you're going to focus that energy. There's a good book called The One Thing that talks a lot about this.
Love that book.
That's a great book.
Yeah.
And so then I got to just think good things come in three. I think that if you're really looking to make an impact in the industry, like you got to be really, really innovative in how things get implemented. Like I felt like that what's made me really successful in the industry is that I use software to communicate. Like I remember when we got Slack and no one else in the industry was using Slack. They're like, oh, email, and like now it's like super duper commonplace. Well, when they announced the feature that lets you connect to other organizations, we were immediately like, how can we connect to our clients' Slacks? How can we connect to our vendor Slacks? How can we all use Slack? Because that's how we communicate. And let's make that the future. Then people go, oh, well, isn't that kind of weird to be instant messaging your clients and things like that? Isn't that kind of informal? And it's like, no, this is what the future and how we have to go for it,
That's how we talk to our clients too.
Exactly. And so like, I think like when it comes to it, like you have to be looking for not just the bleeding edge of within the industry, but also the bleeding edge that's happening outside the industry. So my suggestion to everybody is like, you'll notice that part of my trends, I didn't talk about the AI movement that kind of like blew up this first quarter. Mm-hmm. Like, was it ChatGPT is like the number one fastest growing consumer product of all time. It was like 100 million users in like 2 months or something like that.
Yeah. Faster than everybody else out there that's already killing it. So.
Yeah. And so I think like in a lot of ways, it is definitely a trend. Honestly, it blew up after we had already written our guide, again, showing you how fast this moved. But I think the important thing is that like, if you're seeing this, I see so many people are like, I haven't even opened up ChatGPT. I'm like, I use it every day. I'm using it on my phone. I'm asking Bing all the time, like what the answer to the XYZ is instead of Googling it. And I think that like, if you choose that you say, oh, I'm going to wait until someone else tells me that it's important. If you hear it's important, you need to at least explore it. And I've been exploring very deep. And I think this is a thing that's going to really fundamentally change the industry. And I think the people who are burying themselves right now within saying like, oh, I don't really need ChatGPT, or they're trying to get caught up in the conversation about the rights of artists and where copyrights are and things like that. I think those people are the same people who are going to think to themselves, oh, I don't like Napster because it's illegal and blah blah blah. Well, guess what? Napster still changed the entire world, And what's the quote that he says in the Social Network? Do you see anyone else buying a Tower Records? You know, like we have to think about these things and think about how you can't wait for them to come to you. You need to sometimes go to them as well.
Well, I think that's a really great point. I think that's a really great pivoting point for me. Well, I guess it's not a pivoting point, or like a response point. So I had to write it all down because I was like, whoa.
We'll talk so much.
All the shots were fired. So I am a president of an association, and I'm a vice president of an association. But my reasoning.
Thank you for your service.
Right, because God knows it's for the love. It's not for the money. But my reasoning for doing it was, well, my first thing was when it came to the Graphic Artist Guild, it was really about getting access to a lot of information in terms of like how to run a business. So the Graphic Artist Guild really focuses and provides resources for graphic artists when it comes to like how to actually make money with that good stuff, right?
So it's about education around running a business, and you didn't know where to exactly find that information on how to like run the business side of the graphic.
And so I got I got as far as I am today based on like a lot of the things that like they share. I mean, it's cool. Whatever, I guess I should say.
It's like entrepreneurs organization or something like that.
It's a trade association now. It started as a workers union once upon a time. Now, I say all of that to say the reason I'm still in organizational leadership with them is because for a long time, actually, when I first started, like I was the only Black leader, and I was like,
oh wow, that's amazing.
I was like. It is, but for me,
I bet you. I like have no idea how hard it probably was, but it was probably good to like for you to kind of push through that.
Absolutely. And so then I was like, I want more people that look like me to have access to the same information, and I also want them to be involved in the conversation. And I'm really proud of where we are now because now we have multiple people that look like me in leadership, and we have a much more diverse membership base than we did when I first started. So for me, that's like the labor of love. And that's really about like getting that information out to more young girls like me. Like I'm Jamaican. Deciding to become like a graphic designer is like a faux pas. It's like, so you're not a doctor, lawyer, engineer. What kind of immigrant are you? And so that's my labor of love. And then there's also like, I'm vice president of this thing called the International Council of Design, which is a group of worldwide organizations all working together to like influence the design community like globally. So that in itself is not necessarily about growing the business, right? But it's really about like, again, building those authentic relationships, really adding value to the community. So I still love my association. I just had to say that.
I think there is a future for associations. So like my big like point about it is like, I think associations need to transition towards being online first because like I think you can reach more people. Like I think then it makes it a little bit more accessible as well, right? Like, you know, like I think one of the things that can be kind of scary, and I mean like for anyone who's not watching the video version, I'm a white dude from Phoenix, Arizona. You know, my dad's a doctor. I'm like the last guy who gets to talk about diversity. I have so much to learn when it comes to it. But I will say that like, you know, I'm wondering if it would have been easier for, you know, like you said, you're trying to attract people that look like you and that are like that then feel comfortable and start to build that like that relationship in a lot of ways. I feel like the internet is the barrier that allows you to break through that. It almost doesn't matter where you're from or who you are, what background you're on, because in my opinion, I think because I grew up from the 90s internet when it was really truly free, like the internet is the equal playing ground in a lot of ways. So like I think that for me, I'm like, hey, associations need to be thinking about how they can go internet first rather than who can show up to the meeting in person or, those sort of things. Or who's for me, in a lot of ways, like I'm kind of bitter about it. It's like, it's whoever's on the association board or the chapter board that really gets the value from it. When in reality, it's like, no, like.
Well, what about the actual members who are.
You get value the second you join,
No, I completely agree with that. I mean, I could, we can do a little pat on the back because we were virtual long before 2020. Like all of events were virtual, like that's webinars, amazing. All the fun stuff. This is all my shameless plug stuff. And then you listed like all of your podcasts. And then I was like, wait, why have I never been on those?
Oh, there we go.
I was like, what are we doing? I was like,
we're getting you on Event Icons tomorrow.
Boom. I can do that. I just had to tell you what time. And then we're talking about AI and copyright. So even like right now, I want to say it's tomorrow. Oh gosh, That's horrible because this episode won't air by then. But we're doing the Graphic Artist Guild is actually doing this or this event, which is like a global event in association with other associations about designers' response to AI and like how.
Oh yeah. I forget. I'm over here talking about AI movement, and you guys are the ones who are like probably the most disrupted by the whole thing in a lot of ways.
Well, you know what? I mean, again, my opinion. No one kill me. No one throw a stone at me. But I genuinely believe that it's just like a lawnmower. Like it's what you can use it to enhance what you do for a living. It doesn't mean it's gonna make you obsolete. What will make you obsolete is if you choose not to engage. Like
Exactly.
if you choose not to figure out how to utilize technology to improve the user experience, to improve your output, to create something more valuable for your actual audience or your actual community. That's how you become obsolete. So for me, yes, as a designer, I may be affected, but I'm not about to get counted out.
Well, because of that, I think you're gonna be way more successful. Because I mean, like there were so many times that I'm sure, like I started doing graphic design probably around the time that you did, and 2007 was when like Photoshop was like hitting like its pinnacle. I think like Adobe was switching to the subscription model. Everyone, oh my gosh, and I'm sure when Photoshop first came out, like this is probably before when I was a little kid, is like people were like, oh my gosh, how dare, like they're gonna put photo editors out of business, blah blah blah. And now look at everybody uses Photoshop. So I think like the thing to think about is like you said, it's like a tool. And so like Steve Jobs has that quote that like a computer is like a bicycle for the mind. I think AI is like handing a car to your mind. You no longer have to think about balancing and pedaling. You just push go, and it takes you in the right direction you need to go in.
Absolutely. I am there for that. Well, we've been chatting up a storm. And I mean, maybe we'll just have to bring you back on another time because
I'm ready for part 2.
It's all day. Before I let you go, I do want to ask, what is one industry event you think every corporate event marketer or planner should attend every year? And I know when I put every year, it freaks people out.
Yeah. Because they're like, oh, how can I commit to a single one? Yeah, I would say for every year, it's IMEX. IMEX is really unique in a couple different ways. If you're Europe-based, you can go to IMEX Frankfurt very easily. If you're not Europe-based, IMEX America in Vegas. Everyone can fly to Vegas super cheap. It's a huge hub. There's so many hotels you can stay there very, very cheap. Almost everybody can get to Vegas very, very easily, right? But what's amazing about it is it doesn't cost any money to attend. You can sign up and go for free. But also, too, on top of that, is that if you are an actual event planner, you can sign up to be a hosted buyer. And if you're actually planning events, they will literally fly you there, put your hotel up, all those things like that, to have you have meetings with suppliers. Which a lot of times, like when we're going shopping for suppliers and things like that, we wish that we could just put them all in one room and just talk to all the different cities, and talk to the CVB of Jamaica and all these things like that, right? And I think IMEX allows for that. It's also, this is a quote from Brant Kruger. I tend to quote my friends that we all do podcasts together because we talk so much.
I love that.
He says every year he meets more and more people at IMEX, and every year he meets more and more people in the industry, and every year all of them are at IMEX. And it's like, that's the one conference that I committed to that, coming out of the pandemic when I was not traveling at all and I wasn't moving at all, I said, I'm only going to one conference. It's going to be IMEX America. And so I highly recommend everyone go to IMEX. It's just so amazingly easy to go to. It's less about the content. It's more about meeting people. But because it's free, you basically just need to figure out how to get there and where to stay unless you become a hosted buyer. And boom, just bump into people, meet people. And you literally will meet everybody at IMEX.
Well, I guess I'm going to IMEX.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Will. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your energy and all the information that you were willing to share with the listeners and me.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure. And I'm fangirling that you let me come on the podcast too. So thank you so much.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Aventis 365. We hope you enjoyed listening and learning something new today. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform to help event professionals discover us. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and sign up for our newsletter for behind-the-scenes content and updates on upcoming events. If you have any suggestions for for future topics or guests, or just want to say hello, you can reach us at info@eventus365.com. We love hearing from our listeners. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Eventus 365.